Well, hello there. Good afternoon. Welcome to this special little live show. Myself, Mark Anderson, ICT Evangelist, working in collaboration with North Yorkshire Education Services and Claire Preston. We're looking this afternoon to have a bit of a reflection. Today marks the anniversary of the first day of national lockdown, where children weren't in schools, when children were at home, unable to come in, and it started a whole heap of new things. New terms became part of our everyday speech, from Zoom bombing to asynchronous to synchronous to you name it. We've been thrown at the deep end, whether it's been Teams or Google Meet or Zoom or whatever it is you've been using to ensure learning has moved forwards. And we've seen so many fantastic developments alongside some of the most difficult situations for our schools, our teachers, our head teachers, our families, our communities. I'm really, really pleased to welcome onto this event this afternoon some really fantastic people who've given up some of their time to come and talk and share with us this afternoon. Can I just ask as well, guests, if you're not speaking, just because there appears to be now a little bit of echo and things, if you're not speaking, if you just pop your microphones off, just to avoid any sort of echo and things until it's your turn. But thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. Or this afternoon. I say this evening. One of our guests, Olly Lewis, is joining us from Abu Dhabi, and it is the evening there. It's actually 8 p.m, so I don't feel too bad about saying the evening, given that it's quite late in the day for him. But first over, just to Claire, did you want to take a moment just to introduce yourself, Claire, and your role in bringing all of this together?
Certainly. Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone for joining us. My role is as Director of North Yorkshire Education Services, which is the traded arm of North Yorkshire County Council. And as such, we are responsible for providing a complete range of services to schools, not only within North Yorkshire, but across the UK, many different local authorities and internationally. We wanted to bring together this event today with Mark's help to acknowledge the amazing work of educators over the last year, the challenges that have been overcome, and to just have that opportunity to reflect on this really significant day about what has been learned and what we can take forward. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Claire. I did that thing there where I nearly spoke and my own microphone was muted. So I'm sure one of us will do that at least once this afternoon. Just moving around the panel here, and we do have another head teacher joining us later on during the discussion this afternoon, the reflection that we're going to have this afternoon. But for the meantime, could I just move to you, please, Chris? And I'll move to each in turn. Chris, then Olly, then John, then Amanda. If you could just introduce yourself and briefly explain the context about where you work and what you do, please.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mark. I'm Chris Kirkham-Knowles. I'm the head teacher at Newby and Scalby Primary School out on the coast at Scarborough, and I'm representing a fantastic team of people who've moved a million things, including desks and chairs, over the last year in the pursuit of trying to provide consistency for children. I'm also the school improvement leader within Scalby Learning Trust and work very closely with my colleagues over at Friarage in the heart of the town, where they're facing very, very different challenges. So I come with two very different perspectives in terms of how we've joined together to use the wisdom from both teams of staff to meet the needs of two very different communities.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Olly, I think it was you next.
Hi everybody, my name's Olly Lewis. I'm an educator and leader at the British International School of Abu Dhabi. We're one of the 70 schools now, I think, in the Nord Anglia education group. We are, I think, fair to say, a real international school. We have close to 80 different nationalities in our school. We're an all-through school from nursery through to sixth form, with just shy of 2,000 students. At the school, I've had a hat in teaching and learning, digital strategy, and also head up the science faculty there, and really keen to share and work with and develop professional partnerships across the MENA region as well as within the Nord Anglia region.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Ollie. Next up is you, Jon. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Jon.
Hi, Mark. My name is Jon Tait. I'm Deputy CEO and Director of School Improvement at the Areté Learning Trust in North Yorkshire. We've got 3 schools, 3 secondary schools and 6 form colleges in Richmond, Stokesley and Northallerton. I recently joined the trust in lockdown. I left my old school in July, started this new role in lockdown. So it's been a very, very interesting and strange kind of start to my new role. And that's been a huge learning curve for me, kind of personally and professionally as well. Previous to that, I was deputy head at the school in Middlesbrough, and my kind of key roles have been teaching and learning, pedagogy, behaviour management, professional development, and you know, all things kind of education, I suppose, as you do in the life of a school leader.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Jon. And last but by no means least, Amanda, could you just share a little bit about your context, please? And just pop your microphone back on, please. Sorry. See, I said we catch somebody out with that.
You did it for everybody else. Hello, I'm Amanda, the head teacher at South Otterington Primary School, just south of Northallerton. We have 98 children on roll and then a preschool, and we're part of the Dales Academies Trust.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for sharing that, Amanda. So look, welcome everybody to this conversation. It really hasn't been easy the last 12 months, whether we're thinking about the lastminute.com notifications from our friends at the Department for Education or all the other things we've had to manage. But today marks an opportunity for reflection. Educators are always reflecting, so this won't be new for you. However, reflecting on the last 12 months in a what went well, even better if kind of world, what sort of things do you think you'll be looking to keep from remote education as we move forwards? And I'm going to ask that question first of all to Amanda, please, if you could respond to that. What sort of things are you going to be looking to keep as we move forwards?
Well, we had a huge success with using phonics on our online remote learning in the very first lockdown. And that was, interestingly, that changed in the second lockdown with the younger children, just with the live lessons, the engagement of that. So that was something that we're going to sort of take forward in a different way next time. But obviously, we did a lot with the remote learning. We did a lot of remote learning for parents as well. So we did our parents' consultations online on a Teams meeting with parents and that was just absolutely amazing. Everybody thought it was a really, really good step forward so I think that's something that we're planning to do this term as well, and we'll just carry on. I think that's something that we'll just carry on again.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think I've heard from a lot of schools as well, Amanda, those sort of working with parents using things such as Teams to facilitate those conversations. Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of schools have found to be super, super useful. How about your perspectives, Jon? So you've got your work from within the trust as well, but also your work in your previous school as well. What sort of things are you looking to keep?
I mean, I would second the fact that parent savings, that's been the biggest kind of bonus for us, really. And as a parent myself of 2 kind of secondary and 6th form age children, the fact that you're able to kind of not have to, battle the car park and sit a metre away from somebody talking about your own child and they're talking about their child, and you can overhear the conversations, and we've all kind of potentially been there as parents and as professionals. So that's something I would definitely kind of back up. And from a secondary school angle as well, it can be a meat market on a parents' evening night, so I think that's been a huge plus. But I think in terms of learning in the classroom, what we found, and it was interesting, there's an article in The Guardian that came out about this last week, that we may have just found one of the kind of key ways to kind of potentially bridge the gap if students have got access to technology, because the fact that students can watch an experiment back later on at home, or watch something again, and we all learn at different paces. So actually the ability for either live or kind of recorded lessons, or as we move forward, having parts of a lesson. So if you're going to do a demonstration on a whiteboard, well, traditionally that is there and gone. The magic's gone. When that's rubbed off the end of the lesson, it's gone. The ability to then maybe do that on a touchscreen device and to record that at the same point, and then push that up to kind of Google Classroom or Teams later on, means that student can, or those students can watch that as many times as they want, pause, rewind it, ask questions, Google information, all the things that we know that we like to do as adults. I think that's huge, and that maybe, just maybe, might be able to kind of start to bridge some of those kind of gaps for the students that need to see it more than once, because we've been in a one-size-fits-all kind of education system for too long, where actually 30 students in a class are taken through, and even if it's in a top set, middle set, wherever it is, there are still a huge range of kind of learning speeds and how we kind of process information within those sets. So I think if we can really use the technology to do that, and to give students the opportunity to go back and revisit things whenever they want to, in their own time, on their own terms, then I think we've got a real winner there, Mark.
Yeah, I completely agree, John. It's so good to be able to use the stuff that the kids can use. Why is it as adults we're able to do these sort of things ourselves, but expect students to not have access to them? It just has always seemed a bit of a disconnect from me, from reality to things. And it's not just me who thinks that as well. We had a nice comment from Sarah, who's watching on Facebook. Thank you for joining us, Sarah, who sort of reinforces that by saying, great idea. Thank you, Sarah. Ollie, how about you? What are your sort of what went well is even better ifs? What sort of things are you going to be keeping at BISAD?
It's really nice to hear both the previous guests talk about kind of data, and data in a wider sense, I think is really crucial. How we were really fortunate that we just started on a journey with Power BI and mapping that to our MIS. And I think one of the benefits of that is something that you quite often talk about, Mark, when that's kind of aggregated marginal gains for your teacher or form tutor or head of year, head of department. If they want to find some data on either a specific child or a particular cohort, you've got to go across to your MIS and pull out that report, which can take varying amounts of time depending on how much information it's trying to extract from your MIS. And, my own school, as well as a bunch of other schools in the region, have really been pushing the bounds with Power BI, and that data is accessible to anyone at any level at any particular moment at just 2 or 3 clicks of a button. And once you start to add up all of the time gained by each individual across your organisation, I think that's huge, because that that improvement in deficit that you don't now have can be spent in better areas. And something that I think we're keen to drive is that our live data dashboards and access to those, but also the other side of that, backing up what both you and John have just said, staff professional development. We've got such a rich resource now of staff having recorded content and being able to share it with their colleagues and ask for feedback on that to drive learning in their teams, departments, to improve outcomes for students. But also, aside to that, it's wider access to partnerships outside of your organisation or further across your trust that you might not have necessarily always invested in, but the opportunity was actually there in the first place. So I think both of those aspects are really important, and we're certainly keen to drive that. And on the professional development front, I think schools quite often have gone down the kind of micro or macro approach. So what are the school priorities and how does that feed into a team or a department, but hasn't always crossed the my individual need. And I think that this is a great opportunity over the past year to really enhance and develop that, and use not only the skills in your school and the teachers, but also those professional partnerships. So those are kind of our 3 things.
Thank you very much, Ollie. I love the reference you make about data dashboards, and Power BI is such a fantastic tool for sort of bringing through all this information or data as it is. And how I sort of explain it really is yeah, it is a data dashboard, but what it does is actually gives teachers information, or even better, it gives them wisdom, so that they can be that not only the sage on the stage when they need to be, but they can also have those learning conversations, be a guide on the side as well. I've seen lots of schools really investing heavily in these sorts of systems over the last 12 months as a means of actually helping have those conversations when things haven't been as easy as they might otherwise have been, with being able to sort of work in that sort of presential way, having children in the classroom with them as well. Thank you so much for your insights there, Ollie. Thank you. Jumping to you, Chris, how have you found things in your context, Chris?
Well, I think the first thing to say, Mark, is the important bit about this is it's the anniversary of a beginning, not the end. And we're leaving our reviews till the end. in terms of impact. And what we set out originally was that it was really important to consider this as a very long haul, and therefore if we had things that were being introduced at very short notice for people, we would lose those people very quickly, and we needed something that was very sustainable. So I'm going to sort of almost focus on the people side of this, because ultimately what our children and families really needed was contact with the people that they knew in a way that they could all do. And that's a colleague of mine at Friar Allison said to me yesterday when I was talking to her about it, said, you know, we're on the same sea, but we've got different boats. And I'm sure that's a quote from somewhere, but ultimately, you know, we needed to find a boat that everybody could sail through the sea, and one that was consistent for everybody. And ultimately, the device that was found to be consistent for all of our families was a situation where people could actually talk to them. And I'm bringing it down to a base level here and talking about the fact that picking up the phone and having a conversation with somebody that we knew we could sustain. So thousands and thousands of telephone conversations were made to back up our remote learning offer. And out of anything, that's the bit that we would carry forward as a vital part of our armoury moving on. Because fundamentally, one of the things that I think somebody mentioned at the stage on the stage, or you know, somebody who's got that extrovert sort of outlook on life, who's not worried about going on camera and maybe, you know, sort of having an issue with certain things, needs a lot of time to develop, and that's what we didn't have. You know, I remember walking around school midway through this year and still seeing 20th of March 2020 on certain whiteboards because those rooms hadn't been used. Now, ultimately, you know, that was midway through the year, and you're looking and thinking, why is that the case? Well, things moved so quickly. If we were to introduce things that a number of our staff weren't familiar with through that period of time, we would have very soon ended up with a staff wellbeing issue that would have passed on to our families and children. So that idea of sustainability was important, and those are the things that I think will carry on. And it's more things that you can't actually quantify in terms of the relationships and the knowledge about families that we were able to glean through those flexible ways of working that weren't tied into live lessons and various things like that. And so some of our families were actually having their lessons Wednesday to Sunday, or only in the afternoons and evenings, because their shift patterns work that way. And again, our system allowed us to tap into that in a different way. And that's where I place a lot of value in terms of the Oak Academy and what they were doing, and the mixed views on that, but actually in terms of allowing our most qualified staff to be able to focus on the important bit about building relationships and talking to children through issues with their learning and issues in life made a huge difference to them that we wouldn't have been able to do if people had been in front of cameras all the time. But again, that was specific to context, and it's really important that however people are looking at this, the context that everybody works in are very different, and the legacy issues that we were bringing into this were clearly a vital part in terms of any analysis of what we might do best.
That's a fantastic response there, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. What I really picked out from there is something which has really shone through for me as well the last 12 months. And we know about this sort of thing from research that the likes of Hattie and others have done about the importance of relationships. But it's been the human side of things, which I think has been actually the most important. Yes, we can talk about how, you know, and with my ICT Evangelist hat on, of course, I was going to say it's great that teachers have had their skills improved and we're more confident and competent in all these different things, but actually the cornerstone of all this has been some of the benefits and the things that I've seen that have been amazing have been how teachers have rushed to social media and they've supported each other in hugely collegiate ways. They've been sharing resources, helping each other out, providing a shoulder and providing an ear, and a lift up and a sharing of resources and all these different things. And I really enjoyed your comment, Chris, as well about context, because context is so important too, because it's not there, as we all know, there is no sort of one size fits all thing when it comes to education. People often say no two schools are the same. Well, no two lessons are ever the same. No two children in your school are ever the same. And that's absolutely the case. So your response really resonates with me, Chris. And it's lovely to hear those sort of mindful approaches that you've shared about that, because for all of your ideological approaches, some people think that Oak Academy is just absolutely brilliant. Some people think it's the other end of the spectrum. But I think what's important to take from this is is that for some people in their context, it's what they needed. And it was a great initiative, and it's helped provide continuity of learning for so many schools when, so many teachers have come down with COVID and been so poorly. It's been a real lifeline for many, many schools. And whether you agree with the approaches, how it happened, all the different things or not, I think that's a by the by sort of conversation, really, because what's been so important is that we've been able to provide the support for our schools, our teachers, our families, and ultimately the students and communities that we serve. Thank you so much for those responses, Chris. I just wondered, Claire, with your sort of director role, overseeing all the schools and working with them in the way that you do, what your sort of perspectives were on all of this?
Well, it's interesting actually listening to, everybody's comments are interesting, but I would follow on from what Chris said. Something that I think has come across very strongly is that improved communication. Obviously, as we know, I'm not an educator, but we do support educators who are then educating children. And it's been wonderful to get the different voices and feedback from students, from parents, from teachers and school leaders, and to hear their perception of how things have been going. But one of the things that I think has come across really strongly is that most people feel that communication has improved. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, Chris. I think that's been a huge benefit. Parents feel more involved, obviously necessarily so in this situation, but that's been really, really valuable. And I think that students on the whole as well have felt really connected. Obviously, there are many, many different circumstances and everybody's experience is different and varies depending on circumstance. But I think that generally speaking, there's been an improved level of access and responsivity between students and teachers. Some great relationships have been formed, which doesn't replace the face-to-face involvement. I completely understand that. But I think that communication with the whole school community has improved from what I can gather in a general sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, Claire. Thank you very much for that. And it's so important. We know again from research that triangulation of care, as it were, between home, school and child is so important to their progress and their success. So thank you for your comments there, Claire. I'm just going to bring us all back in like this for a moment. You'll notice across the bottom, viewers, and please do as Sarah Craddock did a few moments ago and sort of share her comments. Please do, whether you're watching on Periscope or YouTube or Facebook, please do send your comments through. We'd love to hear from you. And if you do have any questions for our guests on this broadcast this afternoon, then please do add them in as well. I'll be very happy to take those questions to them. Audience participation is not required, but is not essential, but it is lovely. So please do use the chat feature for that. I've also created a little Mentimeter that I have been sharing the link to and the code to get into it across the bottom now. I can see already that some people have been adding some things into this here. What positive thing can you share from the last 12 months you'd like to take forwards? Blended approaches, holistic approaches, relationships are key, parents' evenings, community, teamwork, caring. I'm not going to read the whole next load that come in because you can read yourselves. But if you are viewing this afternoon, please do take a moment to add your thoughts, your positive things that you'd like to take away, and we'll bring that back in and share that with you all later on towards the end of this live broadcast. So thank you to all of you for your comments and in response to the question I asked a moment ago. I've got some more questions for you. Just going to you, Ollie, I know you've got some responsibility for teaching and learning within your school. And what did you learn? And this could be a response on you personally. It could be a response on you with your head of science faculty hat on. It could be the whole school hat. You choose. And what did you learn during lockdown, Ollie?
I think it's right to continue the thread really on relationships and communication. I think, collaboration is king really, and getting the students to collaborate has been massively important. They've not really had access, to be quite honest, have they, for a year to that social interaction from the classroom. So trying to facilitate that in an online platform is quite challenging at times. It doesn't matter what your system is, it can be quite difficult. I think Zoom had the facility for breakout rooms slightly earlier than Teams, but I think getting the students themselves to collaborate, peer-to-peer collaboration, has been vitally important. And aside to that, something that we've worked really hard on is Areté. Having the students not only communicate with each other but collaborate is massively important, and that's something that you get in the day-to-day normal run of a classroom, every classroom across the school. But we were really worried after a couple of months that students are sat there on their own at home. They might converse with other family members, but to miss out on that social interaction of the classroom is vitally, potentially damaging in the long run to the students. So we've worked really hard on facilitating peer-to-peer collaboration across the school, wherever possible, through breakout rooms, using the Voice 21 framework, talk tactics, having the students just connect and collaborate as much as we can to feel not only that sense of community, but connection to each other across the school. Because that's, whilst it's hugely important for us as staff members to feel connected to the school, we can't forget the students in that as well. So I think that's a nice sort of dovetail onto what you've just shared about, or Claire shared about communication across the school.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Relationships, as we were unpicking, and I've had lots of conversations where we keep talking about relationships and them being so important. So yeah, we're definitely on the same page there, Ollie. Amanda, well, what have you learned about leading and teaching online during the last 12 months in your context?
Well, I'm an ethical leadership pathfinder, so I've been trying really hard in my headship to make sure that every decision that I made as a leader was very ethical, and that has really come to the fore during the whole year. Everything that any decision that I've made has been tried to be based on those ethical virtues and values, and so I've been very open and honest, and that's really come through with the communication. And the big thing last year at this time, I was so worried that my early years children would forget what we looked like. And that was like a big driving force for me right at the beginning. And so because when you're little, you soon forget, don't you, who everybody is. And so that has been key for our school, is that the communication and talking to your teacher and seeing your teacher on, even if it was just, last year's lockdown, remote learning was completely different to this year, but last year we were doing videos of us doing songs and stories, and just so that the children could see all of the members of staff all of the time. And then also I just felt personally that there were so many people that were at home that could be sort of excluded from anything. So we made sure that the children were communicating with all parts of our community, like the care home and grandparents, and it was very much all of the staff had certain people who are stakeholders who were part of our school, like the school improvement advisor, or people who make cups of tea when we go into church, that type of thing. Everybody sort of tried to get in touch with them every week, so that everybody really felt still part of our school. And the staff that weren't able to come into school, I emailed everybody every day, the parents, the governors, the staff, the children, because to me that it was really important that everybody still felt really included in our school.
Oh, that's lovely. And again, that massively resonates with me. Vision and values are so important, and in our roles as head teachers, we definitely have to lead by example, and clearly you've been doing that massively for your community. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your approaches. I'm positive that have been received so well by your community, Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing that. On your scale, John, of things in your trust, how have you been sort of finding that in response to that question, John?
Yeah, I want to share, I suppose, from a school leader, but also from a parental perspective as well, because I'm kind of lucky enough to see kind of both angles of that. And what I like you speak at conferences and we write about this, and I talk about the digital natives and that we're teaching the digital natives. And it wasn't really until the lockdown started that I realized that they were very digitally native in very different skills that we wanted them to be digitally native in. And they were amazing at constructing towns and cities and villages on Minecraft, and Xbox Live with multiple people and speaking, and lots of messaging apps. But then when it came to that first lockdown of them not being in school and accessing emails and accessing their calendar and things like that, actually it was quite a strange experience, because they'd been very, very savvy to a lot of other things and maybe not as clued up as some of the kind of desktop productivity kind of tools that we would like them to be kind of au fait with. And that was certainly something I learned, that actually being able to access emails, organize an inbox, understand how things work, actually took more time than I'd appreciated and more time than I would have originally thought. And I think that if you speak to people outside of education and you say young people aren't that familiar with opening emails and doing this and doing that, they kind of wouldn't believe you, because they would think, well, they know how to do that. Well, yes, they know how to communicate extremely well, but not via necessarily Outlook and Gmail, via all sorts of different other things. So we certainly, and this was in the transition from my last school to my kind of new school, but also as a parent, found that we had to do quite a bit of work there to really get kids and families to where we thought they needed to be, rather than where we necessarily thought they might have been at the start of that. So that was certainly a learning curve personally, as a leader, but also for lots of the students as well.
Thank you, John. That's been my experience as well. I mean, there's definitely a sort of digital skills gap, I would say, particularly, and we hear lots of educators talking about the importance of metacognition, but that's about learning to learn in general. Actually, there are so many ways in which, if we spend some time improving the digital skills of students in tools to help and support them manage their time, with their spacing of their practice, or undertaking their own retrieval practice, or all these different things. If they could have those things, it would be put them in a much better place. And I think that's really drawn a spotlight on those things, as you say, John. And they are, they're already adept in the technologies that they want to be adept in, from WhatsApp to TikTok to Fortnite and Roblox and all the rest of it. But get them into, Office 365 and ask them to update their calendar and keep track of their time and all the rest of it. It's a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that may have contributed to that as well, and I taught a little bit of computer science before I left my last school, was that the curriculum has changed from an IT skills one to more of a computer science coding kind of element, as you'll know. And I think a lot of those generic IT skills, those kind of functional skills that actually students need, they're kind of missing, because I did a straw poll, because I was getting a little bit frustrated when kids were saying to me, how do I save, how do I print, et cetera, et cetera. And then I did a bit of a, what's your diet of IT like at home? What have you got? And most students haven't got, or didn't have, what we would class as a kind of desktop kind of computer. They have a device like an iPad or an iPhone. They've got a console, and it's that kind of console generation of, how do I save? Well, I literally just hold my finger down on my phone and it saves to my camera roll. So that kind of folder structure that we've been kind of brought up with, we understand a folder within a folder within a folder within a folder. It's quite strange to kind of some students, because actually there's only one place that they would store something, which is a kind of photograph. So I think that the way the curriculum's moved on, in terms of from IT to more of a computer science one, hasn't done us any favors in those generic skills, in my opinion, which I think is why we're at that point, because there's lots more coding on iPads and stuff done in computer science lessons in primary school as well. So actually, there's a different diet of what students get to, certainly when they get to to different stages of their education.
Yeah, thank you for that interesting perspective there, John. And I'm not going to dig into my personal views on how a certain minister was influential in changing the IT curriculum into computing and things. But clearly, it does give us a case for change, given the situation we find ourselves in now. I think we do need to be working harder on improving the digital literacy of our young people, so they are better placed to deal with these sorts of situations and support themselves with their learning. So thank you very much for your comments there, John. Thank you to our audience as well. We've had some lovely comments. Sarah commented again about Amanda's community and ethical leadership there. Thank you so much for your comment there, Sarah. And Carol Ann sort of followed up by saying, yes, very positive indeed. So thank you for joining us as well, Carol Ann. Carol Ann asked us a question as well, and I'm going to ask this question to Chris next, if that's okay. Chris, Carol Ann asks, have there been any positive examples of supporting children with SEND during lockdown? lockdown. If you're joining us from Wales, you'll probably know that as ALN. We've got a variety of terminologies, but these are ways in which we support those children who have needs additional to the regular sort of needs that we would find from children in our classroom. So have you got any positive examples of supporting children during lockdown with SEND at all that you could share with us, please, Chris?
Well, again, I think it comes back, Mark, to this whole notion of the connection with the family and understanding the needs of the child. And the variety of solutions that would apply to all children would be used with any child with any level of need. And I think the important bit was getting that balance between online activity and devices and real world activity. So we spent a lot of time across both the schools actually delivering resources that were specific to the needs of the children. So some of that was highlighting things that they could go to directly for themselves, but also we can't undermine the value of a pencil. And I say that out of somebody else mentioned politics, so it gave me a gateway in terms of social equity. Because not related to SEND, but in terms of the broader sense of the context within which schools were working through this, was almost an assumption that there was social equity and everybody could access. And if we throw some devices out there, they'll eventually get to all children. Well, that didn't prove the case for many schools, I'm sure. And it was really important for us that whatever the needs of the family, in the broadest sense, that they had the kit to be able to do what they could do. And it's really important, certainly from a primary and early years perspective, that the assumptions that might be made about older students, not necessarily universally applicable, but that might be made about them in terms of their digital literacy and other things, it's really, really difficult to bring that in the middle of a pandemic. So if they haven't got their skills beforehand, some work needs to be done in the future in terms of how we can future-proof ourselves from that. If we went down as a nation down a route around every child needing to be able to access online, and I'm hugely in favour of it, but the infrastructure and the social equity has to be in place first. Otherwise, you're ending up with a two-tier system of education, which I find abhorrent, and I'm sure my colleagues would also. And in terms of context, I think it's really important that no school has a narrow range of socioeconomic backgrounds to deal with. Everybody has a breadth, but the extremes that we were dealing with across our schools will be a household with 13 people living in it, many of them children needing access to online devices, through to families which would be in high pressure jobs where they needed to be focused on their work whilst their children were there, and a massive range in between. And I think the important bit, and the SEND comes into that, because if you're then in a situation where your child has high level need, it's really important that the school acknowledges that it won't be possible necessarily to replicate the school day, to make sure all of those things are in there, and to work with families really, really closely. And out of all the things we did, I can take absolutely no credit for this. I was in awe listening into some of the conversations that my colleagues were having, to actually get under the skin of the needs of those families and get to know them better than we've ever done before, in order to then start to think about how they could manage the learning environment for their children, if at all, within it, and to make sure that incrementally over time, we increased the amount of access to learning, not assuming that the children could do it from day one, from 9 till 3, but actually worked with them and worked that through and set up a system for doing it that staff could sustain was really important, and adapting that to meet the needs of individuals, and to go and knock on doors, stand 2 meters back with a face mask on, hopefully being identified as somebody trustworthy, and put a plastic wallet of resources on that doorstep that was specific to the children, as well as under your arm having a device that you hope you'll be able to tutor them as to how to use. So lots of different strategies applicable to individuals. And that's, for me, why it was so important that we didn't tie people into short-term things that we couldn't sustain over time, because we really wanted it to be as bespoke as possible. And in a year that's had so many Septembers in terms of restarts and reboots and children returning to school, our concern was really about getting those conversations with them going, so that as near as possible, the same staff were ringing them 2 or 3 times a week and having a direct conversation that drilled into the nitty-gritty of what they needed. And the biggest challenge really for me has been the fact that children have got to recognise you when you're wearing one of those rather than your voice. So I think the whole SEND issue was something that had to be done at a very individual level, which again is something we should carry forward as a profession in making sure that we continue to do that to a bespoke level as we can.
That's a fantastic response, Chris, there. Thank you very much. For me, some of the key things there really are around infrastructure and the importance of that. When I look at our neighbours across the border in Wales and Scotland, where they've got access to Glow and the Hub and all those things, you know, it's not perfect and things aren't completely sorted in Wales and Scotland by any stretch. But having that there to sort of give them that leg up a little bit further forward than we got in England, it'd be lovely to see that sort of thing. Another thing which you touch upon there is the importance of sustainability, making sure that you can actually keep these things up and have those sort of conversations. And it was the other two are two sort of C words of collaboration and community, and working really closely with your families. It's lovely to hear, Chris, about how for you, from your perspective, you don't think you've ever sort of been as close as you have in the conversations and that wrapper of support for your families there. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for that response there. Did anyone else want to feed into Carol Ann's questions about positive examples of supporting children with SEND during lockdown? If you want to sort of give me a raise or pop your microphone back on and share that. Does anybody want to jump on that, or shall I move on to my next question? Okay, well, I'll move on to my next question then. Thank you very much. That's absolutely fine. I hope that response was good for you, Carol Ann. I mean, she has responded, Chris, just so you can see. She says, thank you, Chris. Your long-term planning approach sounds key. Certainly resonated with Carol Ann, who asked the question in the first place there. So thank you very much, Chris, and to Carol Ann for that question. Around about this time of year, and regardless of the pandemic, something we often sort of see a lot of sort of bloggers and people sharing on social media, as teachers start to get towards the end of their training year, whether they're doing a PGC or other ITT, we often see people asking that question or reflecting back upon, if I knew now what I knew then, sort of thing. So with that in mind, if you knew now, if you knew now what you know now, you could go back in time and speak to yourself this time last year, what advice would you give yourself about how to sort of move things forward throughout the year? What advice would you give yourself to make the best of what is the most terrible of situations? And I'm going to take that question first of all to John, please.
Thanks, Mark. I think leading on from what I said earlier about the digital natives or that wrong perception, I think that I've said this a few times, that if I'd known what I knew now, like you said, I'd have done nothing in the first. We had 2 weeks, didn't we, before Easter, pretty much, in terms of when we were kind of, you know, and we thought at the time it might just be 2 weeks, we might be back after Easter, and we were unfortunately, we didn't know it was going to be this long, and it was always, we were waiting for Boris, and it was a kind of a 2 or 3 week cycle of, so we never really knew how long this was going to be. If I'd known now how long it was going to be, I think in my previous school where I was, we'd have done nothing else in that first 2 weeks other than train the students and train the staff. And we wouldn't have tried to do lots of other things, but of course we didn't know that, and we didn't know the time scale. But going back to in terms of, if we'd have spent time doing sessions on how to access your email, how to get organized via your calendar, how to, you know, access documents on Google Classroom, etc., and then also how to upskill the staff in being confident to deliver the live lessons when we were using Microsoft Teams at the time, and you know, I'm now in a trust that's using Google, but irrespective of what the platform is, there were lots of, like someone said earlier, the kind of nervousness, or there were some people who were happier, some people weren't. And I think that 2 weeks would have been, you know, really great investment into people, whether it was students, whether it's families, whether it was staff, and that would have been fantastic, and it would have actually made that first lockdown far more effective than I think it was, because I think that lots of us were scrabbling in the dark. We didn't know how long we were going to be doing it for. We were choosing different platforms. Some was live, some was not. You know, and I remember we had a discussion very similar to kind of what Chris was mentioning, that actually we didn't want to put a lot of huge resource into the teachers delivering lots of live things at the time, because we didn't know how long it was going to be, and we wanted to use the time more for getting ready for when we come back, because again, we thought we might be coming back in a few weeks' time, etc., etc. So I think that having known what I know now, we'd have definitely done that, and that would have been a far better platform for the next 12 months forward. But of course, hindsight's easy, and we were always waiting for the announcement, weren't we, from Downing Street to think, well, are we going back in? Are we not going back in? So we were only ever looking forward, probably 3 weeks, I would imagine, 3-4 weeks at a time. And realistically, we would never have kind of done 2 weeks worth of training just for an extra 2 weeks. It was, so I think it's very difficult to say that, but certainly that would be my takeaway. And if I had that time again, it would have been preparing for people and training people.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that, John. And I'm minded to agree with that. A large part of the work I do is around improving the confidence and competence of teachers using technology. So, I definitely saw there being a gap, a need for that sort of thing at the start of lockdown. Although things have massively improved. I've seen your social messages today, John, on Twitter and on LinkedIn, talking about teacher confidence and asking people where they feel they are now on that sort of scale as well. So thank you for sharing that as well, John. Thank you. Amanda, I want to ask the same question to you, please. If you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently, do you think? I mean, I love your ethical approach. So, I mean, maybe you wouldn't have changed many things at all. I'm just interested to find out.
Well, interestingly, so back to the ethical leadership again, is the forefront of my mind was the well-being of the children, the well-being of the staff, and the well-being of the parents. And it's that gut feeling, isn't it? So I often had that gut feeling to do something, and there was always that nervousness that perhaps I wasn't doing the right thing. And then a couple of days later, everybody would be doing it. So I think I would have more confidence in myself as a leader, knowing that as long as you're doing the right thing for your children, your staff, and your parents and your community, then that's the thing that you've got to keep at the front of your mind. But I do agree that with what John said, like the lockdowns were so very different, and we've learned such a lot. I mean, this lockdown was harder for us, I think, because we had sort of half 60% of the school in, so the teachers were actually doing like double the work in this lockdown, whereas last time they were just providing work basically the children that were at home, but this time we had to have the live lesson starters and the work for children in school as well, so that was difficult. But I think for me personally it would be we've learned such a lot, and as you said, we couldn't at the time, we just didn't know, did we? And if it had been differently, that would have been great. But I think it was just a whole year of learning for all of us, wasn't it? So and the remote learning at this time was really significant for our children. So that was good, yeah.
No, absolutely, and thank you for that. And it sounds like you've done a fantastic job with your school. That the approaches you've got around making sure your choices and the way you work, keeping your families, and that ethical leadership that you talk about is just lovely to hear again from you. Thank you very much, Amanda. Claire, I just want to jump to you. Have you got any perspectives of the schools that you support across the whole sort of region, and any sort of thing, you sort of group things together? So if you were to ask to go back in time, what you would sort of advice you'd be sharing?
I think, although there was a huge, there has been and continues to be a huge awareness of the need to support well-being of teachers, I think that maybe we could have done more proactively around that, but that's easily said in hindsight. But I think that it's really important to note, and if I was going back to sort of give myself some advice, it would be to not underestimate the range of responses that you get from different individuals, depending on their characteristics and their own needs. And it goes back to what Amanda was saying, and I think that ethical or authentic leadership was so important, because everybody was feeling vulnerable. Everybody was feeling, what do we do? This is not the job that I've trained to do or that I've done for the last 20 or 30 years. So some of the most experienced school leaders were questioning their own ability to do their job because of the changes that were thrust upon them, as well as feeling a huge sense of responsibility for the whole school community. So I think the well-being of teachers, school leaders, obviously, as well as children, is a big issue for me.
Yeah, no, I'm minded to agree, and I look at some head teachers that I worked with before, and people who are in the sort of popular sort of cultural knowledge. I'm friends with Vic Goddard, for example. Many will remember him from the Educating Essex series, and so I can see John shaking his head as well. Yeah, he is someone who leads through example, and he does things that are right for his community in his context for his children. And I think, you know, that's the sort of approaches that we've seen in conversation today from Amanda, from Ollie, and you're resonating that yourself there as well. Not meaning to miss out Chris or John either, because it's a common strand through all the conversations we've been having this afternoon. So thank you for sharing that, Claire. Thank you very much indeed. I'm mindful that we haven't got too much time left now, so I'm going to pose a final question just after I share one more comment from one of our audience this afternoon, which is from Sarah again. She shares, as a parent teacher, school adaptability has really highlighted to me what I value and look for in education and educational leadership. It struck me that some schools have shone through ethical leadership, a new phrase on me, and the embodiment of well-being over fierce pupil attainment. You know, for me, I get to see teachers, head teachers in schools all around the world, and it has been that strong, you know, vision and values about making sure that, you know, yes, grades are important, yes, you know, exams are important, yes, the curriculum's important, but there are things still more important than that, and that's making sure that you're okay. And if you're not okay, you know, having the structures in your schools around you to support those that need that extra bit of help. And again, we've heard examples of that from everybody this afternoon, from the work that John's done in his school, Chris, Amanda, Ollie as well. So thank you for your comment there, Sarah. I'm going to finish with a final question now, and it's one that I'm going to go in. I'm going to go off piste, as it were, but in a Room 101 style. You know, there are lots of things that we can put into Room 101, but what sort of things do you want to keep? And we talked about some things already, but I'm just trying to sort of pick a few more things out that you would I'd like to sort of keep and have that as our sort of final point for the conversation this afternoon. And working down the line, as it were, I'll start with Ollie, then Amanda, then Chris, and then John, and then I'll move to you, Claire, for your final comments before we wrap up at the end, if that's okay with you, Claire. I can see you nodding, so that's all good. So, Ollie, over to you.
Can I choose one thing or multiple things that I'd like to keep?
If you can do it in 60 seconds, then you can do as many as you can in 60 seconds.
Already been mentioned before, digital parents' evenings. I think they're fantastic. Opportunity to collaborate across schools, across trusts, globally. Having people at the centre of everything and every decision that you do, just like everyone has you know, echoed this evening. Putting digital citizenship on the map. I think there's never been a better time for that, and that forming a part of not just our kind of PSHE curriculum, but our wider curriculum across all subject areas. Working closer with families, and something I think is really important, and we've focused on quite a lot, is holistic education. So taking time away from screens to read, to cook, to do a puzzle with your family, to do something for your community, a passion project, anything like that serves education really well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ollie. And for your last comments, please, Amanda.
Definitely the parents' evenings, staff meetings as well. We've done remotely, so staff could do at home. We've really liked that. And something that you won't expect me to say is, but we've had staggered start and finish, and we've obviously had parking issues outside our school. So that's that's really helped us, so that when the children arrive at times on morning in the 15 minutes, the parking hasn't been as bad. So that's been I think we're probably going to keep that on going in that same staggered start and end of the day.
That's a fantastic thing. And say my children don't go to the same first school anymore. They've moved up to a middle school now, but I know that having that staggered start for a very small school, but in a very on a busy, it's so helpful to have that opportunity. But when there's so many cars around and things, brilliant share. Thank you so much, Amanda. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. I think the first thing is that it's really important nationally that we continue the focus on mental health and well-being of everybody that's been highlighted, and I think if we can sustain that, that I think will help everybody in the long run. I think that one thing that I'd like to bottle, if we could, is that that ability within our profession to do the possible in an impossible situation. I've seen more and more of that throughout this last year than ever. I know we're going to need it as we move forward, because as I said at the beginning, this is anniversary of the beginning, not the end. And I think we're certainly going to be in a position of facing new impossibles that people will find solutions to within their contexts, which are hugely important. And I think on a lighter note, I think I'm going to keep 2 screens on my desk from now on. I never believed that I would need 2 screens on my desk, but the amount of Zoom headaches that I've got by not being able to shift between documents quickly, I've now solved by having these 2 screens. So I can recommend it to those who are like me and said, no, you never need that.
Brilliant share. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for all your comments this afternoon as well. Thank you very much. And back to you, John.
Yeah, something that the head teachers are telling me in the 3 schools, that they're certainly really finding those split lunches and split kind of break times really useful. And that's something that, 24 months ago, 12 months ago, you'd have been laughed out of the place by saying, should we have 5 lunch times, or should we have 3 or 4 break times? It'd have been, or should we have staggered starts? It would be like, well, how do you want to do that? It's a logistical nightmare. But it's making the place a lot calmer. There's actually year 7s playing again, properly playing, rather than feeling, kind of that they shouldn't do what's a bit silly in front of smaller students. And I just think that's made a real kind of difference to the well-being of students as well. Even though there's a fine line between, sometimes it has a knock-on effect of, depending where your building is and where students are playing in terms of where the lessons are, there's always those kind of trade-offs, isn't there, about how can we actually make this work for the best of it. But also, I just want to say that I think as well, I really want to keep, and I really want to hope we keep, the human element of digital technology that I think we've seen. That I'm actually, when I'm speaking to people now, I'll say, let's jump on a Gmeet or a Zoom rather than ring me, because I think I'm finding physically watching and speaking to somebody, the body language and actually that human connection, we can get through digital technology. And I think that before the lockdown, technology had a bad rap sometimes, that it was depersonalizing things. But now we've seen where you kind of moat for digital kind of feedback on student work and getting the richness in your voice to be able to tell someone how amazing a piece of work or how disappointed you have been with that piece of work. That doesn't come through in red pen on text. So I think the human element that we can now get in digital technology, I think, is here to stay. And for me, working across 3 schools, being able to have Zooms and Google Meets, although they're not everyone's cup of tea, but actually, rather than traveling 30 minutes and having everyone move everywhere for one meeting, it's just so much more efficient, isn't it? And even from one end of the building to another, well, I'll just call you on Google Meet. There are so many ways that we can still make that personalized, and I think that's really here to stay.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Although I don't think my Apple Watch would like me to not be getting out of my chair and going for a walk from one end of the school to the other. It'll tell me off. It'll say, get out your chair, Mark, and all this sort of stuff. But no, I completely agree, because it's those little, Olly mentioned the idea of aggregated marginal gains earlier. It is lots of little wins that can actually add up to big wins when it comes to efficiency. And one of the great things, you mentioned the tool Moat, for example, which is a great tool in Google Workspace for education, for leaving audio feedback. You can do similar things in Teams and OneNote as well, but it's that connection, that ability for the student to still hear your teacher's voice and the intonation. We're talking, I can see that you're, and making that human connection thing again. I'm saying something and you're nodding. When you were saying something, I was nodding. It's part of that interaction that you have, isn't it? When you have those sorts of conversations, which, whilst we might be actually geographically remote, the technology can actually reduce that remoteness. And when you can use the tools that are available to you, you can do so much more. Thank you so much for your comments there, John. Thank you very much indeed. Claire, with your forbearance, before I jump to you for your sort of final comments, I did want to just bring up the Menti that people have been filling in during the course of the show, and just to wrap that little part of the show up as well. So you've had some lovely comments here about teamwork and community and so forth and so on. But what I absolutely love about what we've had from the people who filled this in today is that relationships are at the absolute heart of everything. And I think that's absolutely fitting as my sort of last comment for this afternoon's conversation. Thank you to those of you who filled that in. Thank you very much indeed. Claire, over to you for your sort of final thoughts, please.
Well, that's been fascinating to have those insights. Thank you, everybody. I was hoping that Mark was going to ask me what I would like to keep, because there are obviously lots and lots of things that I would like to keep based on the conversations that we've heard today and other things that we know. But for me, one of the things that stands out and that I'll use to close today is the fact that not only has communication increased within our school communities, I feel it's really, really improved within the whole teaching community. Here we are as part of a global learning community this afternoon. And I think that's become all the more prevalent. We've hosted events where we've had an international audience within NES, which has never been done before. And we've proved this afternoon that we can do that quite easily by reaching out to each other. And I think that the teaching community is immensely supportive and collaborative. And I think that that's a wonderful thing to have come out of this year of challenge.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Claire. And because you said it, what things would you keep, Claire?
Do you know, innovation
and a list of 10.
Innovation and the rate at which things have been able to progress, and teachers are known for their innovation generally, aren't they? And not always sort of looking at new ways of doing things, but I think there have been amazing examples of that. And partnerships, we've partnered with some fantastic organisations and individuals, including yourself, and that's all happened at quite a rate. And personalised learning, I think that there has been an improvement in personalised learning as well. Certainly as a parent, I can confirm that, and different sort of experience that I've been hearing about. So I think that that blended approach definitely for me would be the way forward.
Great stuff. Thank you for sharing those insights as well. And that just leaves me to say thank you to our audience who've joined us this afternoon. Thank you so much to John, Ollie, Chris, Amanda and Claire for joining me this afternoon. Thank you to Claire and Louise for helping me set all of this up and to have these conversations. It's been really, really lovely to have the opportunity to connect with some new people and reconnect with some old friends as well. And I'm going to leave the very final comment to Sarah, who I feel has been like our extra panelist this afternoon. Thank you for all of your comments this afternoon. She says in her final comments, thank you, well done to all of you for all of your hard work, dynamism, I can't pronounce that this afternoon, dynamism and best intentions. Your efforts are appreciated. You know, with my parent hat on, I applaud you. I know how hard teaching is. I taught for more than 20 years, but, you know, it has been beyond, you know, the last 12 months. So I applaud everyone who's out there still teaching, probably in some meetings right now, probably still talking to some parents somewhere. But thank you to you, John, Chris, Amanda and Ollie for giving up some of your time. I know how very, very busy you are. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you're interested, I say, please do get involved by going to the link I'm showing across the bottom now before I hang everything up. If you're interested in learning more about what NES are doing, we've got an EdTech show on the 22nd of April. You can learn more by visiting bit.ly/NES EdTech show. Plenty of information on the site there about the things you can learn on that particular day. But from me, Mark Anderson, ICT Evangelist, and all of my lovely guests here on this broadcast this afternoon, thank you so much and look forward to catching you again in the future. Take care and be safe out there, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks. Everyone.